Welcome to Dear Book Coach. I'm Terry Thayer, author, quilter, focuser. I live outside of Boulder, Colorado in Longmont, Colorado.
I am Carrie Savage, a writer and certified book coach, and I live in Somerville, Massachusetts, just outside Boston.
And I am Stephanie Detlefs, writer and certified book coach, and I live in Bellingham, Washington, which is a little bit north of Seattle.
So this is a friendly advice space for you to, as you plan, draft, and revise your novel. In each video, we answer one question from a reader like you from 3 points of view, and you get to pick the advice that works for you. Today's question comes from Charles. And Charles asks, I hear a lot about show, don't tell. How can I tell if I'm showing, not telling? Isn't it okay to tell sometimes? That's a lot of tells. What do you think, Carrie?
I can tell that you're nervous about this, Charles. Sorry, I couldn't resist. For you to say, isn't it okay to tell sometime? Yes. I am going to base a lot of what I'm saying off of some stuff that I've learned in a class that I took with the wonderful Steve Almond, who I highly recommend as a teacher and writer and just all around fascinating, funny, wonderful human. But anyway, I took a class with him called Why Show Don't Tell is a Crock. So I guess you could probably guess where I'm coming from. And it's not that he was saying you know, never show and always tell, but basically that there is a place for both, of course. And the big thing is that I think with show don't tell, writers feel like if they tell that they're giving the game away, that they're basically showing their hand. And that's not as if you're just showing. You don't know that if the reader can feel what your protagonist or the character whose point of view we are in, we don't know how she's feeling if we don't know what she knows. So you sometimes have to tell us what the knowledge base is when we're going into a scene or going into the overall narrative. I mean, this happens on a macro level and a micro level. And ask yourself, if you're not telling us something, why are you withholding those facts from the reader? Sometimes like a scene may be actually functioning as exploratory work, that maybe you as the writer are working something out on the page that then you'll either go back and condense or get rid of because you see, oh yeah, that was me figuring that out. My reader doesn't need to know that. Maybe you are so familiar with all of the elements of the story that you're telling that you lose sight of what the reader does and doesn't know. So they're reading along and then all of a sudden this thing happens and they go, wait a minute, where did that come from? And that's a terrible thing to happen because that's where you can lose a lot of your readers. Don't put your readers into scenes without giving them what they need to make that scene emotionally resonant, to make that scene meaningful, to give them the information that's going to help them put all the pieces together and realize, oh yeah, this is why the scene is interesting. This is why I'm like, it's meaningful. It's making me happy, sad, furious, you know, frustrated, whatever it is. Having more information can actually ratchet up the tension when readers know, and sometimes when readers know what's going on, and sometimes your reader is going to know more than the character on the page, and that, you know, you can use to make your readers feel really smart if it's done right. Scenes are not where you should be dispensing information. Scenes are where characters come together for like disputes and disruption. They're where you move your story forward. Telling is giving them the context for the scene so they can understand and make meaning of what is happening. And I guess I could go on about this for a while longer, but I don't want to take up this too much time. So I guess a summary that he had given me that I think is just really wonderful, and I keep it in the back of my mind, is just suspense establishes stakes. Surprising your readers is a trick. And again, that goes back to you've all of a sudden this thing has happened and I don't know where it's come from. I don't know why it's happened. And instead of just feeling satisfied, the reader's going to be frustrated and they could very well put the book down. Whereas suspense, you're ratcheting up your stakes and then you do a reveal or you let the reader put pieces together and they feel super smart and satisfied and happy. And that's what we all want, is happy readers.
Happy readers.
So yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. But definitely it's a balancing act. Don't be afraid of telling. Stephanie, what do you think?
Yeah, Carrie, I think I'm going to have to rewatch this video and take notes on the things you just said, and also see if I can find that class, because I love Steve Almond also, and it sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said a lot of really great stuff there to unpack, so I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch that. The first thing that I wanted to say about Show Don't Tell comes from my experience as a classroom teacher. So I taught elementary through college, really, but mostly elementary for a lot of years. And what I know about Show Don't Tell in the school setting, the way it's often used, is as show means describe with sensory details, and tell means just say what happened. So like the difference between I kicked the ball and a paragraph long description of the setting and what it felt like when your toe hit the ball and all of those things. So I think that's where the confusion about Show Don't Tell comes from sometimes, and why when somebody suggests that you show a scene more, we think that that means sensory details, and it is part of it, but it's not all of it. It's the things like Carrie was just saying as well. So there's a Chekhov quote that is pretty well known, which is, if in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired. Otherwise, don't put it there. Right? So it goes with what Carrie was saying, that this is the bigger picture of the concept of Show Don't Tell. So you're showing the reader things that matter to the story. If the pile of books on the table doesn't matter, then the reader doesn't need to know that it's there. But if the pile of books shows us something important about the character or the action that's to come, then yes, show it. And then later show us why it mattered. Don't just tell us that the pile of books matters because the character is an introverted bookworm who'd rather read than go out into the world. Maybe I'm talking about myself. Show that through her actions and the decisions that she makes throughout the book. So that to me is the big difference between showing and telling, is explaining versus using the details to illustrate it, and let the reader trust that the reader is going to understand what you're showing them and make their own meaning out of it. So that's what I have to say. How about you, Terry?
Don't forget, the alternative title for this podcast or this YouTube was 3 Introverted Chicks Get on YouTube. So
Right.
we've got the introversion down. And Steve Almond is a big, he's also responsible for this because of his Dear Sugar column, right? So, but I'm taking a little different take on Show Don't Tell, I think, than the two of you. And I think you need to develop an ear and an eye for it. So this comes down to your reading as a writer. Notice when you're reading if you feel some irritation or confusion or boredom. Notice if you feel distant from the characters. Telling can mean that we're not experiencing what the character is going through. So you'll notice that in a story that you don't feel like you've been through the experience with the character. You just kind of know what happened because you were told. So take note if you're being talked at rather than having the story unspooling in front of you. When you're writing, now you can be on the lookout for your own proclivities. There are certain words that mark that you are telling and not showing. And this is all situational. Showing, not telling is very complicated, and it can be on a macro level or on a micro level. So it behooves you to do some reading about it. I really love Janice Hardy's book on showing, not telling. And she talks about filter words. Filter words are words that kind of put a block between you and your reader. Even phrases like she saw or he felt. She saw a bird flitting by. Just let us see it. A bird flit by, or he felt angry. Show us what he did, what kind of actions he does when he feels angry. let them have that feeling. Even words like happy or sad can be pure telling. Describe what happy means to your particular character. To some, that's a nice cold beer, and to another character, nothing but champagne will do. Specific detail can keep you from veering into telling, describing the space around, using all of your senses, relying on your senses to immerse your reader in the story. However, like Stephanie was saying, these specific details aren't enough. These details, like every word in your story, should be doing double duty. They must be there for a reason. You don't point out that the character is wearing a 6-carat diamond ring unless there's some significance of that to the story. Like Chekhov's gun, that detail is loaded and needs to come back to go off or into the story at some point. I would say just keep an eye out for this. Keep watching while you're reading and noticing if you're using words that distance your reader from your protagonist while you're writing. That's all.
I love those filter words.
Yeah, at least it's something you can do a search for, right?
Yeah.
It
feels more tangible than some of our other suggestions.
Well, it's a complicated
it is complicated.
Yeah, and it gets boiled down to that really simple like rule that actually is, of course, as most things are with writing, it's a lot more nuanced than that. So it's something we all continue to work on in our own stuff, I know, and so hopefully we can take some away for our own work too. Well, that is it for today. We hope you found an answer that made sense to you at this point in your life and at this point in your book. And if not, see Steve Almond.
Janice Hardy.
Yeah. Remember, you can submit your question at any time at dearbookcoach.com, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.